Hi guys, hello, welcome to my channel. A new season is quickly approaching, so that means it is time to do our next installment in our kind of like new releases series that I've been doing. I do this every single season. I come out with a long list of all kinds of different books that look interesting that are going to be coming out in the upcoming season. And obviously our next season is going to be spring. So without further ado, let's get into our spring 2025 releases, aka the books releasing in March, April, and May of this year. I'm very excited. I've got a lot of really fun books, and then also I have quite a few like outside of my comfort zone, which I'm pretty excited for. And we're gonna go ahead and obviously start with our March releases. And per usual, we have several different release days for March, and the first one is going to be the 4th, and we have, I think, the most out of any release day. And the very first book that is going to be released that I'm super excited for this spring is Fable for the End of the World by Ava Reed. And this one actually is a really good one to kick off this list with as well, because it is being released as like a deluxe limited edition with some sprayed edges, really cool cover, yada yada yada. This one is a YA dystopian sapphic romance, so we have all kinds of fun buzzwords in there. By encouraging massive accumulations of debt from its underclass, a single corporation, Ceres, I think is how you say that, controls all aspects of society. Inessa, we're gonna say that, lives with her brother in a half-sunken town where they scrape by running a taxidermy shop. Unbeknownst to Inessa, their cruel and indolent mother has accrued an enormous debt, enough to qualify one of her children for Ceres's live-streamed assassination spectacle, The Lamb's Gauntlet. This book has very difficult names. I am so sorry, I'm going to butcher all of them. Melanie, something like that, is a Ceres assassin trained to track and kill the sacrificial lambs. Product of neural reconditioning and psychological alterations, she is a living weapon, known for her cold brutality and deadly beauty. She has never failed to assassinate one of her marks. I'm going to assume until Inessa. When Inessa learns that her mother has offered her as a sacrifice, at first she despairs, but she's had years of practice surviving in the apocalyptic wastes, and with the help of her hunter brother, she might stand a chance of staying alive. And then kind of like skimming over the rest of the synopsis, basically we have Inessa, who her mom puts her into the gauntlet as a sacrificial lamb, which sounds awful. And then we have Mel, who is the assassin, and she kind of like needs a redemption arc because in the last live streamed one, she had like a breakdown or something like that. So she's like determined to definitely assassinate all of the contestants. Very excited for this one. I think it sounds super good. The next on our list for the 4th releases is Our Infinite Fates. This one sounds super cool. Basically, it's about a woman who remembers all of her past lives, but in every single life she's murdered before her 18th birthday. And I think it's always by the same person as well. Yeah, it says Arden, a supernatural being linked to her soul. But now she's kind of like found herself in a situation where she's in a life that she doesn't want to be removed from. So now she's kind of like on a mission to hunt down Arden and stop the cycle. Oh yeah, and then another element of that is that she actually falls in love with this guy that keeps murdering her as well. So like the tangled webs we weave. I'm so freaking excited for this book. It sounds so interesting. Next up for the 4th, we have Night Weaver, which this is another deluxe edition. All of these are like special editions. Are they even special anymore? I don't know. Am I still gonna buy them anyway? Yes. This one says, filled with elemental magic, forbidden romance, and breathtaking twists, Night Weaver is a propulsive romantasy about an iron-willed heroine avenging her brother and discovering her destiny. This one is about Aster, who is a pirate, like her and her family are pirates, and during a battle against some Night Weavers, her brother gets killed. And then it says, when a handsome Night Weaver named Will offers the family protection and work at his opulent estate, Aster is suspicious. As the arrogant and entitled right hand to the wicked prince, Will is everything that she has been taught to hate. But as he shows empathy and kindness, Aster can't ignore a blooming attraction, and even more, Will opens her eyes to a new reality. There are monsters worse than the Night Weavers, monsters who may be behind her brother's death. So we have like a little element of enemies to lovers going on as well. I guess that's like the forbidden romance part. She's not supposed to like a Night Weaver, but she's gonna anyway. Next up we have Emberclaw, and this is actually the 2nd book in the Dragon Scales series. The 1st book is called Dragon Fall, and I do own that book. I purchased it kind of like near the end of last year. I have not read it yet, but I definitely want to this year, hopefully, and I'm excited that there's another book coming out. I'm not going to talk about what either of the books are about because I have talked about Dragon Fall in another video and I don't want to be like repetitive. Also, we have so many other books on this list that I can't do synopses for every single one of them, you know? Next up we have Raising Hair by Chloe Dalton, and this one is a nonfiction book, but it sounds like it's gonna be so freaking adorable. This one is basically a memoir of a woman that finds an abandoned little baby bunny and brings it into her house with the intent of kind of rehabilitating it and then releasing it back into the wild. Through trial and error, she learns to feed and care for the leveret. I've never seen that word before. I'm assuming it means baby hare, maybe, but I'm gonna say for the purposes of me feeling like I'm not pronouncing that correctly, I'm gonna say bunny. Through trial and error, she learns to feed and care for the bunny with every intention of returning it to the wilderness. Instead, it becomes her constant companion, wandering the fields and woods at night and returning to Dalton's house by day. It sounds exactly like something that I wish would happen to myself. I want to find a baby bunny and have just like a wild animal friend. Though Dalton feared that her hair would be preyed upon by foxes, stoats, and feral cats, raptors, and even people, she never tried to restrict it to the house. Each time the hair leaves, Chloe knows she may never see it again, yet she also understands that to confine it would be its own kind of death. Raising Hare chronicles their journey together while also taking a deep dive into the lives and nature of hares and the way they have been viewed historically in art, literature, and folklore. I feel like I really missed out on being like an animal scientist or something, like somebody that just like watches or like researches and studies animals living. Like that is so interesting to me, and that's what basically this book is, and I'm so excited for it. Moving on, the next one that we have is another book in a series, but this one is the third book in the Legendborn series, which is Oathbound. This is another series that I have not read yet, but I do own the first two books in this series, so I'm excited for the third one. I've heard really, really good things about the series just in general, and this is another one that I have actually talked about in another video as well, so I'm not going to do it again in this one. But if you've read Legendborn and you're waiting for the third book, it's coming out soon. And then last but not least, for our fourth releases, we have Wildside by Elsie Silver, which is also the third book in a series, the Rose Hill series. It is also another series that I have not read yet, but I do own the first two books of. I have so many books on my physical TBR and like so many series that I'm in the middle of or just like own that I haven't even started. So many things that I need to read. Moving on to our second release day for March. It's March 11th, and we only have one book, and it is a nonfiction, but again, really intrigued by it. So it's called Me But Better by Olga Kazan, something like that. This one says, research shows that you can alter your personality traits by behaving in ways that align with the kind of person you'd like to be. In Me But Better, Olga embarks on an experiment to see whether it's possible to go from dwelling in dread to radiating joy. For 1 year, Olga reluctantly clicked yes on a bucket list of new experiences, from meditation to improv to sailing, that forced her to at least act happy. With a skeptical eye, Olga brings you on her journey through the science of personality, presenting evidence-backed techniques to help you change your mind for the better. So I'm really excited about this book. I think it'll kind of like help me and like push me along to like try more things on my bucket list and stuff like that. So there's that one. Our next release date that we have for March is the 21st, and we also only have one book for it, but it's one that I am so very excited for. This is Wanted by the Alien Warden. These are like spicy sci-fi romances, and they are just so stinking good. It's basically about a small colony of cowboy aliens. They're convicted felons essentially, and they've been exiled from the rest of like their species, and these cowboys were convicted when they were children. So now that they're adults, they've been given the opportunity to like improve their lives and have wives and things like that. But because they are felons, they don't want to send women of their own species there for them, so they're giving them human wives. So each book is essentially the romance between an alien cowboy and a human, which the humans are, for whatever reason, which is part of the stories as well, voluntarily brought to this planet. Like they're not forced. This whole series is on Kindle Unlimited, and the second this one's released, I'm gonna be reading it. I'm so excited. Moving on to our last and final release day for March, we have March 25th, and we have a few books. The first one is Blood on Her Tongue. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, this one definitely drew my attention because of the cover and like the sprayed edges. It is got the darkest, creepiest kind of vibe, but the synopsis of this one also sounded good. So this one says gothic horror for the ages. I don't read a whole lot of horror, but I feel like every year I get kind of like more and more into it. So this one says, the Netherlands, 1887, Lucy's twin sister Sarah is unwell. She refuses to eat, mumbles nonsensically, and is increasingly obsessed with a centuries-old corpse recently discovered on her husband's grand estate. To protect her twin from a terrible fate in a lunatic asylum, Lucy must unravel the mystery surrounding her sister's condition, but it's clear her twin is hiding something. Then again, Lucy is harboring secrets of her own, too. Then the worst happens. Sarah's behavior takes a turn for the strange. She becomes angry and hungry. I don't really know what to expect from this book, even after reading that synopsis, but I'm very intrigued. Moving on to the next book on our list, which has a completely different vibe. This is Summer in the City by Alex Astor, and this author is the author of Lightlark, the Lightlark series, which I've been reading and absolutely loving. So I'm excited to kind of read something different from her. I honestly don't even know at all what this is about. I never even read the synopsis. I just know it's from Alex Astor and it's a romance. So that was good enough for me, but I'll go ahead and skim over the synopsis to give you a little bit of a briefing. This one says it's a swoony, fast-paced rom-com set in New York City in which a screenwriter and a sexy tech CEO go from lovers to enemies and back to lovers again. Also, too, another thing that I wanted to like really quickly point out about this book is it is actually being released in several different versions, which is kind of fun. They all have like the same general look, but the colorways of the covers and the hardcovers, and then the foiled kind of design on the hardcover is going to be different depending on what store you buy the book from. This one in particular is the one that I'm personally going to get. It's the one that's from Amazon. The colorway is pink. It's got a really cute little like Cupid foiled picture on it, which I thought was adorable. The author has like several different posts about it on her Instagram, so if you want more information on that, just check out her Instagram. Moving on to our very last book for our March releases, we have The Shadow Bride, which is the second book in the Scarlet Veil series, which is a spin-off of the Serpent and Dove series by Shelby Maharan. I was absolutely obsessed with the Scarlet Veil series, and I have been equally obsessed with this spin-off series, which is just going to be a duet. So after this book, it's done, which I'm kind of sad about, if I'm going to be honest. I really enjoyed that first book. It's basically revolves around vampires. Vampires are definitely one of my favorite like fantasy romance love interests. I love a vampire romance. And that's all I'm going to say about that one because it is the second in the series. And with that, those are all of our March releases. Now let's go ahead and move on to the next month in our little list, which is April, which is also my birthday month. So extra excited about these ones. And our very first release day for April is the 1st. And the first book that I have, you would think might be an April Fool's joke for me, but it is not. I have mentioned this several times, but essentially in the last like 3 years of kind of like getting back into reading and things, I have been avoiding sad books like the plague. I do not want to cry. I don't want to read about, you know, sad relationships between people. Like I want all of my books to be fantasy and lovey-dovey and happy. However, for whatever reason, at the start of this year, actually I think it was kind of more so the very end of last year, I purchased They Both Die at the End, I think is what it's called, which we will be bringing up again later on in this list. But I bought that book, and that is basically about like a service that lets you know when you're going to die. And it follows two characters that like spend their last day of living together or something like that. So I mean, immediately I know that that book is going to absolutely rip my heart to shreds. But for whatever reason, I really want to read it. And then also actually, the same time I got that book, I got another one about a woman whose sister is dying of cancer. And in kind of like honor of her sister, she does her sister's bucket list or something like that. So like, I don't know what's in the air right now, but for whatever reason, I am really wanting to read these like super sad sounding books. So this first one that we have for our April 1st releases is Meet Me at Blue Hour by Sarah Suck, something like that. In this one we have two childhood friends, one of which works for her mom's memory erasing clinic. So in this world, those kinds of things exist. And it says she feels lost and disconnected from people, something she's felt ever since her best friend Lucas moved away 4 years ago without a word, leaving her in limbo. But then apparently Lucas ends up moving back, and when they end up running into each other, he doesn't remember who she is. So essentially, he has gotten her memory erased. And it says, as the two reconnect, they unravel the mystery and heartache of what happened between them all those years ago and must now reckon with whether they can forge a new beginning together. It is like a male and female relationship, like friendship. So I'm assuming maybe there was like feelings that weren't reciprocated or something. I don't know. But either way, one of them was distraught enough to want to completely erase the memory of the other one. So you have that kind of side of it, but then you also have the other one that's coming to this realization that her friend has erased his memory of her. So for whatever reason, I think in 2025, we're going into our sad girl book era. There's a sad book for you if you're interested. Next up, we have Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. And Abby Jimenez is one of my favorite like romance writers because she always adds in a little bit of like real life into it. And I really feel like that like enhances and kind of like upgrades your typical like fluffy romance kind of vibe. Gives the book a little extra depth, and I always really appreciate that. I still have not read her last one, the summer one. I don't remember what it's called, but I still need to read that one. I've heard really good things about that one, and I'm excited about this one. Although I will say, not a fan of this cover. Not a fan of the cover at all. Next up on our list for April 1st, we have Where Shadows Meet. This one has such a sad setup. Perfect for our unintentional sad girl era theme. But this one is basically about two women. One of them sacrificed her wings for love, and then the other one sacrificed that love for power. I don't know how to say this character's name. Favre, something like that, never got over the loss of her wings, and Thana's choice led to a life of eternal night and later their destruction. So I'm assuming maybe because she sacrificed her wings, she became a vampire? She has bided her time ever since, waiting for the chance to resurrect the girl she loves who turned her into the creature she hates. Now, 1,000 years later, Layla, the crown princess of a vampire nation, must travel to Nekros, the island of the dead, when her best friend is captured during an attack on her nation's capital. But nothing is as it seems. The closer she gets gets to her goal, the more she risks awakening an ancient evil and destroying everything she holds dear. Ooh, okay, so this, I think the romance is actually going to be between Favre and Layla. I'm intrigued. The final book for our April 1st releases, we have Sweet Obsession, which is the 8th book in the Dark Olympus series by Katie Robert. I started reading the series in the beginning of last year. I basically like binged all of the books that were currently available. And since then I've been kind of like reading the books as they've been released. And now we're on to the 8th one. There's going to be 10 total, and kind of like the very general premise of this series as a whole is basically a kind of like mafia style modern retelling of like Greek mythology. And it is very much like a smut / like erotica series. I definitely feel like this series started off very much kind of like focusing on the romances like in the first few books, but as the series has kind of like progressed, we're getting kind of like more and more of like a developed backstory and things, like another thing that's going on outside of the romances. And it's been really, really fun. Moving on to our next release day for April, which is April 8th. And the first one that we have is Firebird by Juliet Cross. And I'm not gonna lie, this is another one that really intrigued me or caught my attention initially by the cover and the sprayed edges. Like, this is gonna be a cool looking book. I can't wait to see this in person. From the moment Roman, general and nephew to the emperor, laid eyes on Melina, he was enthralled by the Dacian dancer. Years later, the fierce beauty stands before him on a scarred battlefield, her life in danger. He instinctively shifts into his fierce dragon form to save her, an action that may mean his head on the imperial gate. But he and his dragon know one thing: she belongs to them. That is definitely giving me spicy vibes, which I'm very excited for. But also, I've never read a book about a dragon shifter before. I feel like I've mentioned that so many times and I have still yet to read one. Maybe this will finally be the one. Moving on to our next book, we have Enchantra by Kaylee Smith. And this is actually the follow-up to Phantasma, which I read last year and absolutely loved. And I do think this one has a completely different cast to Phantasma, aside from the main character. I think she's like the sister of the lead from Phantasma. But other than that, I think it's a completely different story with a completely different group of people. But I do think it still has kind of like a sense of like a trial or a competition type of situation. This one is a twisted labyrinth in a palace in Italy. The setting sounds really cool. For Enchantra is a twisted labyrinth, and Rowan's family is forever trapped there in a deadly game. Only one occupant from the house can survive. Genevieve must win or die. And this is another one actually where like less is more. I kind of want to go into this more blind. I did that with Phantasma. I didn't really know much about it. I just kind of read it and I had a really, really good time doing that. So I kind of want to do that with this one as well. So that's all I'm going to say about that one. Moving on to Boys with Sharp Teeth by Jenny Howell. The cover of this book is so cool. This one has a really, really cool, interesting kind of plot. 17-year-old Marin has spent her entire life living in the shadows of the exclusive Huntsworth Academy. And when her cousin's dead body is found in a creek on school property, Marin knows exactly who to blame. So what she ends up doing is actually enrolling in this academy, I guess, to kind of like seek justice. But it says, but her quest is quickly muddied by a confusing attraction to her new life and to the two dysfunctional and depraved boys who somehow understand her better than anyone else ever has. So essentially, instead of seeking justice, she ends up falling for them. And I am beyond intrigued by that. Last but not least, for our April 8th releases, we have Their Monstrous Hearts. This is another kind of like gothic horror novel. This one says, a mysterious stranger shows up at Ricardo's apartment with some news. His grandmother, Perihan, has died and Ricardo has inherited her villa in Milan along with her famed butterfly collection. And the rest of the synopsis basically talks about the fact that he's a writer and he moves there hoping that like a change of scenery will kind of like help him with his writing. But he ends up finding the place kind of like creepy with all like the pinned butterflies and stuff. And his grandmother has some friends that are lurking and they just seem kind of like off. Ooh, and then apparently he stumbles upon her diary. I love like a diary element in a book. I think that's so fun. And it says it might hold the key to her mysterious death or at least give him the inspiration he needs to finish his manuscript. But he might not survive long enough to write it. So it's kind of got like a murder mystery aspect to it too. I don't know if it sounds like something that's like on the top of my list to read, but definitely interesting. Next up, we have a couple of releases for April 15th. The first one being The Perfect Divorce, which I think I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that it's kind of like a follow-up to The Perfect Marriage. Obviously, it's by the same author. The covers are very, very similar, so I'm assuming it's kind of like a spin-off of that or like a companion novel or whatever. And I'm gonna be honest, The Perfect Marriage was never a book that I was particularly interested in reading, but there is like literally just one line at the top of the synopsis that really intrigues me for The Perfect Divorce. It says, "Till death do us part, yours, not mine." I feel like I need to read this book now, which in turn makes me feel like I need to read The Perfect Marriage. And then the only other book that I have for the 15th is Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage. I finally got around to reading Done and Dusted earlier this month and completely obsessed with it. Absolutely love the writing and the storytelling of that book. So I cannot wait to get more into this series. And the fact that there's a 4th book coming out just makes me feel like I need to read them like all sooner than later. Although I will say, like briefing over the synopsis for this one, I do not recognize the names of the people in this book. Moving on to April 22nd, we have another book that I added just this morning, which is The Summer I Ate the Rich. This one has such an intriguing concept. There's a quote at the top that says, "Just add garlic, lemon, and a dash of the 1%. This smart, biting novel explores what happens when a Haitian American girl uses her previously hidden zombie abilities to exact revenge on the wealthy elites who cause her family pain. The rich families who love her cooking praise her use of unique flavors and textures, which keep everyone guessing what's in Brailla's dishes. The secret ingredient? Human flesh." We've got a private chef that is feeding the rich the rich. Gross, but like also intriguing. Like I want to read that. I want to see what happens. Moving on to our last 2 books for April. They both have different release days. The first one is April 29th, and this one is called Night Swimming by Erin Starmer. And the cover of this one, this is probably one of my favorite covers of this entire list. I am obsessed with the colors and like the artistry of this cover. But also this one has a really sweet, but probably, I feel like this one's going to be a very like bittersweet kind of read. I can definitely see it having its sad moments. So again, our little like sad girl era vibe. This one's basically about 2 friends who pool hop at night. Like they, I guess, break into people's backyards and swim around in their pools, and they go to a different pool every night until they find like a hidden pool. It says things finally change when they learn about a natural pool hidden deep in the woods. But once they get there, they realize that this place has a curious hold on them and something very strange is happening. And also too, one of the people in the friendship, it's a male and female friendship, and the male has feelings for the female, but she has a boyfriend. That's where I feel like the kind of like bittersweet slash just like sad vibes are going to come from. Just kind of like him yearning for her and her not feeling the same. And now moving on to our very last book for April. This one in particular is one of the ones that I'm probably the most excited for this entire list. And it is also being released on my actual birthday. So very excited. This one is going to be released on April 30th and it is called Obsessively Yours. Earlier this month, I read Viciously Yours. I found it very randomly, just kind of like scrolling through Amazon, and it, you guys, had the cutest concept ever. It's basically about a fae prince who finds out who his mate is when he turns 13, and it just so happens to be a human, and because of like certain circumstances he is not able to like cross the border between the fae and the human worlds. So because he can't actually meet his mate in person, he sends her letters and like presents and things like every year on her birthday. And you kind of like get to go through that process of her getting these gifts and things like that. Then when they turn 25, they finally meet in person. And it is just so good. And I'm not going to talk about the synopsis for this one because it does involve characters from the first book and I don't want to spoil anything. But if you like kind of like a dark, unhinged male character, you should definitely read Viciously Yours. So good. And with that, those are our April releases. Now let's go ahead and move on to our May ones. And our first release day is May 6th. And there is only one book, and it is one that I kind of like talked about earlier. So we're going to circle back to that. The Survivor Wants to Die at the End by Adam Silvera. And this is the 3rd book in They Both Die at the End series. That's what the first book is called. Again, this is the book that kind of like triggered our sad girl era. When I first picked up They Both Die at the End, I didn't even realize that there was a 2nd book. And now all of a sudden there's a 3rd one coming out as well. So I'm gonna have my hands full with this series because these do have very interesting concepts. So again, the first one is about 2 people that are going to die and they spend their last days together. The 2nd book is called The First to Die at the End. So it's basically about the very first person to ever die, I think, through this like program or this like, I don't know what it is exactly, but the whole concept of like somebody being told that, okay, tomorrow at noon you're gonna die. This one's about like that first person that ever went through that, I think. And then we have our 3rd book, The Survivor Wants to Die at the End. And this one is about someone that is like waiting for this app to tell him he's going to die, and it's just not happening. So he takes matters into his own hands, which just sounds so depressing. But for whatever reason, I want to see what happens. So that'll be an adventure that I go on at some point. Next up, we have our May 13th release days. We have got 2 books. The first one is the 2nd book in a series, which is actually one that I've been waiting for a little bit of time, and I'm so excited for it. This is A Curse Carved in Bone by Danielle L. Jensen. The first book was A Fate Inked in Blood, and I really enjoyed that book. Well, I really enjoyed the first half of that book, and then it kind of like, I feel like the momentum of it it kind of like died halfway through, but it was still overall a really good book, and I'm still very intrigued to kind of like get into the next one. Also, what's really cool about these books is they do have sprayed edges, but they're like metallic sprayed edges. So the first one was like a really glittery, cool metallic blue. This one's gonna be metallic orange. And not gonna lie, I'm really excited to see what that's gonna look like in person. Moving on to our other book that's gonna be released May 13th, we have The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I've never read a book by him before, but I've heard of him. And I'm gonna be honest, he's not an author that I ever really thought I was going to read, but the cover of this book really grabbed my attention, and the actual synopsis does sound really cool. This one says, a brand new epic fantasy, so it's not romance, it's like literally just fantasy, from bestselling author Joe Abercrombie, featuring a notorious band of anti-heroes. Brother Diaz has been summoned to the sacred city, where he is certain a commendation and grand holy assignment awaits him. But his new flock is made up of repentant murderers, practitioners of ghastly magic, and outright monsters. The mission he is tasked with will require bloody measures from them all in order to achieve its righteous ends. I love a found family type of vibe, and if you take a found family and make it dark, I'm there. Moving on to our very last release day for this entire video, which is May 20th, and we have 2 books. The first of which is The Knight and the Moth, and apparently this is going to be the first book in a series called The Stonewater Kingdom, and this is by Rachel Gillig, which sounds very familiar. Oh, okay. She actually wrote One Dark Window, which I have not read yet, but I've heard literally nothing but good things about, and I do have it, so I need to read it this year at some point. So this is actually going to be a new series from her, so I feel like this is going to pique some people's interest. This is another one with a gothic kind of vibe, which is kind of funny. I feel like a good chunk of these books are gothic or like dark, which I feel like is a very weird vibe for a spring release. This one is basically about a diviner who like sees visions in her dreams, and a knight who doesn't really respect her visions, but she ends up having to ask for his help because the other diviners are starting to like disappear one by one, and she needs to figure out what's going on before, you know, something bad happens to her as well. And she asks him to help her for whatever reason. So I'm intrigued enough. Again, I don't know if this one's like at the top of my list, but it's a fantasy romance, so I definitely want to read it. And now, last but certainly not least, for our entire list of our spring releases, we have The Starving Saints by Caitlin Starling. And this one probably has one of the weirdest covers of this entire list. And this one honestly is definitely one that I think is going to be outside of my comfort zone. It definitely kind of gives more like literary fiction type of vibes, which is typically not my jam, but I keep trying. And this one specifically grabbed my attention because it says it's a dark medieval tale of survival, divine intervention, and unraveling mysteries amidst a castle's descent into madness. I love like a weird medieval castle vibe. I've only like watched shows and like movies with that kind of vibe, so I'm intrigued to read something with it. Cause also too, just like the graphics of this one on Amazon looks so cool. Oh, and it's also sapphic horror, which I didn't realize. A sapphic horror fever dream. Yeah, this is definitely going to be that literary fiction vibe that I typically don't like. I've said this in the past, but like any book that is described as a fever dream, I want typically nothing to do with it, because I read Bunny. There was nothing about that book that I liked, and that one was very widely talked about as being kind of like a fever dream. So just from then on, I just was like, anything that's described that way, I don't want anything to do with. But this one, we're gonna give it a shot. It's been what, like 2.5 years since I read Bunny, so like maybe things have changed. Maybe. Anyway, the next little graphic says, an ex-nun turned witch, a war hero turned trophy knight, a disgraced noblewoman turned servant. I mean, that all sounds interesting. And then it says, you're invited to a feast for the mad. I don't know, I'm just really intrigued, and I think that's all I really want to know about that one. Again, because it's kind of a genre that I typically don't like, I think I would prefer to go into it way blind, you know? And on that note, those are all of the books that I'm kind of like looking more forward to this spring. Not necessarily to like read this spring, because again, a lot of them have like dark gothic-y kind of vibes to them, but books that are going to be released that I definitely want to add to my list to read later on in the year. Let me know if any of these are going to be added to your list as well, or if there's a book that's going to be released in either March, April, or May that you're really excited for that I didn't mention. Go ahead and list it down below. I am always looking for more books to add, and also to, you know, other people might see it and want to add it to their list as well. And with that, I think that is everything that I have to say. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you have / have had the most amazing of days, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye!